Yeah, so it's 18, we're back. And yeah, I was saying 1745 before without actually looking that it was 1745. Sorry about that. But well, now we continue with the market part of this conference. And as said, our next speaker is Orrell, who is among his all main research interests. She is the lead author of the annual Distributed Wind Market Report, and she will present us today the outcomes of the latest editions. You can see that she's already sharing the screen. And Alice, are you there?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, perfect. We can hear you, we can see you. So the floor is yours. Thanks for joining.
Okay, thank you. Hello, everybody. My name is Alice Orrell, and I'm at Pacific Northwest National Laboratory. And I'm going to share some highlights from our annual Distributed Wind Market Report for the United States. And last year, we changed the report naming convention so that the year of publication is part of the title, but the data goes through the end of the calendar year of 2021 so far. And these slides are already available on our webpage. I dropped the link in the chat if you want to look at them later. So I'm just going to get into it. We documented 11.7 megawatts of distributed wind capacity in the United States in 2021. Sometimes we break up the market into turbine sizes. So in this graphic, we've broken it up into small wind. That's the blue. That's up through 100 kilowatts. And then mid-size is the yellow. That's 101 kilowatts to 1 megawatt. And then large scale wind turbines is the green, and that's greater than 1 megawatt. And in a lot of our graphics, we do a rolling 10 years. So this one goes back to 2012, but we've actually documented capacity or deployment back through 2003. So the cumulative capacity of just over 1 gigawatt is from 2003 to 2021. There was 3 states that led the United States in new distributed wind capacity. That was Rhode Island, Kansas, and Minnesota. And that was because each of them had one big project, because we're not talking about a lot of megawatts, right? 11.7 megawatts, and each of those states had one big project. And then we were able to document projects in 15 states total. Iowa and Minnesota are the top states for cumulative distributed wind capacity. They both have really strong wind resources in the middle of the country. They have active project developers, and they've historically received a large number of U.S. Department of Agriculture Rural Energy for America program wind grants. So these grants go to rural businesses and farmers, and that has helped support the deployment in those states. And then for small wind capacity, the top 3 states are Iowa, Nevada, and Alaska. But you'll see in the graph that Minnesota, with the yellow bar, had the most small wind capacity additions in 2021 because the Canadian turbine manufacturer EOCycle has been focusing on the agricultural market there and selling a lot of turbines there. And then New York used to be a leader in small wind capacity additions. They had an incentive program that's now been discontinued. So you could see that they had some more installations in 2019 and 2020, but the yellow for them for 2021 is very small. And we expect to see more drop-offs in New York once the last projects that were eligible for the incentive are paid out. There probably won't be that many more. So we've noticed that 6 developers have accounted for 40 or more % of distributed wind capacity for projects using turbines greater than 100 kilowatts in size since 2015. So that's a lot of information in one headline. But as I mentioned, that Iowa and Minnesota have active developers. We have this handful of developers in the United States, but they only operate in 1 or 2 states each. So there's this kind of scattering of development, not uniform across the country. So for example, the light green color in 2021 is for a company called Green Development. They only operate in Rhode Island. And then the dark green color that you can see in 2019 is One Energy, and they only operate in Ohio. So we just have this kind of scatter shot of these developers because it takes a few years for their projects to come online. And so they're not necessarily consistent year to year and not national. There was more diversity in what turbines were used in projects in 2020 and 2021 compared to the past 2 years for the turbines greater than 100 kilowatts in size. So the light green is the GE, General Electric, and they've been consistent across all the past 10 years in having turbines in distributed wind projects in the United States. But then this past year, 2021, we had a few more turbines represented in projects. This is small wind now, jumping down to small wind. There was a slight increase from both the US-based and the non-US manufacturers in 2021. So the yellow is the non-US, and then the dark green is the US manufacturers. And then the light green is refurbished. And we keep refurbished separate because oftentimes the turbines are manufactured by a company in one country, but refurbished by a company in another country. For example, lots of the smaller Vestas turbines are commonly refurbished in the United States and reinstalled. And then more recently, it's been like another Canadian manufacturer that's out of business, Endurance, and their turbines are being refurbished by a US company. And one thing I wanted to point out too is we use the language US based intentionally because going back to these bigger turbines, we've gotten some feedback that, well, GE is a US based company, but where is all of their manufacturing for their turbines compared to somebody like Goldwind, which is a China-based company, but they have a lot of manufacturing in the United States. So to avoid the domestic content argument, we use language like US-based, because that's where the headquarters of the company is. One thing we promote is the use of proven technology that's demonstrated through certification to standards. So in the market report, we include a list of the currently certified turbines, either to the OEA standard or to the IEC standards. And so as of the market report publication this year, there was 7 that were certified. There was one that their certification expired on July 1st when we were in the middle of writing the report. So we made a footnote that they were in the process of renewing their certification and did not ultimately include them in this table. We keep track of the incentives that are available to the distributed wind projects, and they've been going down over the years. In 2021, there was just $5.2 million given to projects across 8 different states. A lot of it is the state production tax credit that's available in Iowa and New Mexico. And then there's the USDA REAP grants that I mentioned earlier. And those have increased compared to past years, but they're still very, very low in their dollar amounts, which I think is the next slide. So yeah, in 2021, just under $700,000 US in the REAP grants were given to 22 different wind projects in the United States. So if you look at, that's the yellow bar, you can barely see it in this graph because the y-axis has to be so big because the solar grants are so much larger from the REAP program than they are for wind and for energy efficiency projects. They give other grants as well, but these are the energy efficiency and the solar ones are the two big ones that we compare the wind to. And these are grants. They also give out loans, but there's only been 2 REAP wind loans in the past 10 years, while solar loans just keep increasing in dollar amounts and number. So we've been looking at small wind and large wind costs, installed costs on a per kilowatt basis for all of the market reports, but we keep doing it a little bit differently. So if you were to look at past reports, it wouldn't match this report, but in this report we've done in multiple years, so you can compare within the report to past years of how we're slicing and dicing the data. So we have new installed projects, and then we break out the retrofit projects separately because they tend to have lower costs because they're reusing existing towers and foundations. And then some years we just don't have a lot of data. There might be a number of projects installed, but it's difficult for us to get the costs for those projects. So like in 2018, we don't have an average because we only have 2 projects. And then I think in 2020 is the same thing. We weren't able to give an average for that year. But in general, the costs were hovering around that $10,000 per kilowatt for a number of years. And now they've started to drop. In 2021, the average was just around $5,000 per kilowatt. And then with the retrofits, they were around $33,400 per kilowatt in 2021. And then if you replace the turbine that's no longer working in your retrofit with a refurbished turbine, that's even a lower cost in the retrofit cost range. This is for the projects using turbines greater than 100 kilowatts. And that capacity, average capacity weight installed cost in 2021 was just under $3,000 per kilowatt. And the same thing here, there might be more projects than we have costs for, but we only got costs for a few of the projects. In 2020, we could only find costs for 2 projects, yeah. And this one kind of jumps around a little bit because this is a big range of turbine sizes and project sizes, anywhere from 101 kilowatts to maybe 8 or so megawatts or something like that in that range. So it's a big group. We also try to look at performance, especially for small wind, and we've been taking different approaches to how to look at performance. So this one, my colleague Lindsay's on the call too, and she put this graph together. And so we looked at small wind turbines for which we had performance data for 2021, and the average capacity factor across all these projects was just 13%. But then we broke them out also by region. And so you see in the little tiny US map, the blue and the yellow, that's the middle of the country where it's the windiest. And the yellow Southern Plains bar in the middle of the graphic had the highest average capacity factor, just under 20%. But some of the other ones are lower. So this is also, based on data availability, what sample size we have, and we're trying all the time to get more and more data to beef up the sample size. This is for the larger projects using turbines greater than 100 kilowatts. They had a slightly higher average capacity factor of 22%. And you can see it kind of just scatters across the turbine sizes. We broke it out by turbine sizes, and then color coded them by region. And there's not necessarily a trend here, I would say. Then we're also looking at what is the actual production of a small wind turbine compared to what was initially estimated at the time of installation. So when you installer, is selling the turbine to the customer, he or she has to use whatever available tools there are to make an estimate. And so how good are those tools? That's research we're doing too. And so we're comparing the estimates to the actual production. And in this case, it's also color coded by region. And then we normalize the 2021 wind speed to isolate that factor. And the historical data indicated that 2021 was a below average wind resource year. For most of the projects, there's just the two that had a better wind resource year that are on the right side of the one line. So that could be one factor contributing to the low turbine performance recorded in 2021 relative to expectations. But otherwise, all, except for these two projects, these two orange ones at the top between the 90 and 100% production, they're really all not performing as initially estimated for a variety of reasons that we're also trying to dig deeper into understand better. So in the beginning, I mentioned we sometimes break up the market by turbine size. We also look at the different types of customers. So if you look at the number of projects installed in 2021, agricultural customers had the most projects in terms of numbers of projects. And then second was residential customers. That's the gray and the green, the light green. But then if you look at capacity, the utility customers that are using the large scale turbines and having more of the front of the meter projects, they account for most of the capacity installed, not just in 2021, but most years, or all years even, or most years, I'll say. So that's the dark green on top. Then we also look at interconnection for either on-site use or local use. So we call local use the front of the meter projects that are serving the distribution grid, the local community, the loads that are also on that same distribution network. And then the on-site use is the behind the meter projects, or the off-grid projects that are serving that direct load. And so this one also, the number of projects are more likely to be on-site use and most likely, to be behind the meter. But when you look at capacity, because they're the bigger turbines, on the front of the meter projects, that the local use projects account for more of the capacity to serve the local loads. We started looking at the average size, the average capacity of turbines greater than 100 kilowatts that were being used in distributed wind projects. And 2 years ago, in 2020, the average size was 2 megawatts. And that was like a doubling from the 2003 when it was around 1 megawatt. But then when we did the data for 2021, we're like, oh, it dropped. Now what is the story here? Because it was just growing kind of before. And so we realized that, the years that drop, like 2008, 2010, 2015, is when there are a lot of mid-sized turbines in the capacity deployed that year. So for whatever reason, that's something we can look into too, is that the mid-sized turbines don't have a consistent market presence, but when they are a bunch of them in our sample size, of what's been deployed, then they're going to bring down that average turbine size. We also look at the small wind into smaller size segments, because as I said, this is a big range of, from 0 to 100 kilowatts. So can we look at it in smaller chunks? And for a number of years, the 2017, 18, 19, the tiny turbines, less than 1 kilowatt, were making up a lot of the units and the capacity of small wind being sold. But then in the past couple of years, the new turbines and the refurbished turbines have increased to take up more of the capacity. And actually the next graphic shows that better. We did it as a percentage, the different sizes as a percentage of total capacity addition for the small wind sizes. So you can see that the blue, the tiny turbines were growing, accounting for more, and now the bigger turbines in the last couple of years are accounting for more of the capacity. I think that's it. I was going to skip market potential, future outlook, because Ian will cover that in his presentation. And conclusions, we need more wind. That's the conclusion. And here's some information if you want to get the full report, photo gallery. We have a project data set, and we're about to launch a new database. And we'll have the link on our main page soon. It'll be another week or so, I think, before we'll have that out. But yeah, I stop, and if there's time for questions, we can do that.
Thank you very much, Kat. Are there any questions? Yes, we have one question here from the audience, from the physical audience.
Hi, Alice. You are a national laboratory of Pacific Northwest, and many of your small wind turbines are connected to grid. If on-site isolated wind turbine, did you consider to supply them with green hydrogen storage?
I have not personally looked into that kind of pairing, the green hydrogen storage, but I think that's something that the industry is talking more about, but I don't have any information about it personally. If anyone else wants to, yeah, Mike can say something.
Well, I think Ken Visser had his hand up.
Yeah, let's let him first.
Oh, I'll defer to Mike if he's got something to say.
Well, it's just a thanks, Ken. It was just a question for you, Alice. In the where you're looking at the performance versus projections in 2021, it looks like you tried to normalize the wind speed, but it looks like you normalize velocity, but of course energy content goes at least a square and maybe a little bit above that. And if you were to add the lost performance due to the wind resource, I think the numbers would have been much more favorable to actual versus projected. What's your cut on that?
I don't know, but I think we could look at that for sure. Lindsay, do you have any thoughts?
Yeah, so Mike, we were just trying to look at some of the numbers because, the customers tend to get one estimate, for performance, and it's supposed to represent an average wind resource year. And, when we're trying to understand, oh, okay, well, the projections are not, matching what happened in the year, we want to be able to tease out a few things like, was it a below average wind resource year? So we were normalizing the wind speeds relative to themselves. So we were taking decades of wind resource data and looking at, okay, compared to the long-term average, this was a lower wind resource year, which could go to some of our explanation why they're not meeting those average estimates that were given to the customers. That was our aim there.
I agree with the aim. I just think the math could have been better, because if you would have increased the percentages by the missing energy due to the off year off wind resource year, then the numbers it would have shown a closer representation of what the actual versus projected was, because now it looks disproportionately ugly
Yeah.
because the
To
math
give it
wasn't
credit.
quite right.
Okay. Yeah, we can look at that approach to give it credit for what it missed because of the low wind resource year. Okay.
Okay.
I think I understand what you're saying.
Other than that, I love everything else.
Everybody, is very is worried about how we present actual performance, because there needs to be a lot of qualifications on it. So yeah, we want to be careful about that. You're right.
And Ken?
Well, first of all, thanks, Alice, because that's a great report, and the report's great too. And it's just great to see all these different statistics, especially over time. I just wanted to throw out one. This is more like a comment to your comment on the incentives that disappeared in New York State, which is where we live here. And I had the opportunity to talk to some folks at NYSERDA a couple of weeks ago at the Advanced Energy Conference. And I said, well, look, you have incentives for solar. Why can't you have the same incentives for wind? It's not like we're asking for more. We're just asking for equal. And they said, well, really, you have the wrong perception. This is what I was told. So I'm just passing this along.
Okay.
And that is the goal of NYSERDA in this case, as I was told, was not to make things equal, but to maximize their benefit. And they feel that if they push more money, well, they're pushing nothing towards wind, but if they push their money all towards solar, they would have a better chance of meeting their prescribed goals from the governor level or something like that. So that was kind of, I didn't really think about that, but I just wanted to pass that along to you as some of the reasoning why you see such a drop off, say in New York in particular.
Yeah, no, I heard something similar. You're right. They want to maximize their dollar value, so they think they'll get more bang for the buck off of bigger stuff. So bigger wind projects offshore.
Right.
Yeah,
So there's the
maybe
offshore thing, but I was talking about, specifically on smaller systems, solar projects or wind projects, for business and rural and stuff like that. And they said, no, we feel we can make better off of solar than wind, so we're not going to let anybody have any incentives off wind. So of course, I didn't agree with that, but that's what they're saying.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Thanks.
Yep.
Any more questions? Doesn't look like.
No,
Okay. Then, thank you, Alice, for the presentation.